Good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, I should say. My name is Michaela Smalley, and I'm here with the Basketball Embassy at the International Coaches Summit. And we now have a speaker who is going to come to us live from Canada. Her name is Coach Carley Clarke, and she is the head coach of the women's basketball team at Ryerson University. And she is also an assistant for Team Canada women's basketball. So today she's going to be speaking about some zone defense techniques and tactics, and we couldn't be happier to have you here, Coach. So whenever you're ready, just go ahead and take it away.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for having me here today. It's just been an amazing, I guess, few weeks or even a couple months now of sharing and learning through this forum. So happy to be a part of it, and really just appreciating the opportunity to take in and listen to some tremendous coaches and speakers, certainly on this clinic and others. So today I'm going to talk about zone defense, talk about some techniques that we use at Ryerson, and as well as some different tactics that we've experimented with, and in particular used this past season or past couple seasons. My experience has been quite varied in that I've been with our national team through different age groups, and now with the senior team for the past 10 or so years, and then in the Canadian university system for 12 to 15 years in different roles here. So have been really fortunate to be exposed to different countries, different teams that have a variety of different strategies and tactics in using zone. It's certainly not the area that I have the most expertise in, but I've tried to use it a little bit more. Early on, I think in my coaching career, I was a little bit more risk adverse and didn't do a lot of experimenting or switching things up with zone. But now we're starting to do a little bit more of that. So I'll share again some of the things that we do and some of the thought processes behind the zones that we use. So I'm gonna share my screen here. Hopefully this works properly. Okay, so first thing I'm going to talk about is why we use a zone, or different reasons that we may use a zone. I think that one of the most common ones that coaches think about is changing tempo or momentum of a game. So the opposing team is having a lot of success with what they're doing offensively against you, so you might switch it up in order just to disrupt their rhythm. Oftentimes it might be in order to protect a player. One of your better players picks up a few fouls. You want to avoid that player being attacked in a one-on-one scenario and trying to keep them out of further foul trouble. There might be a weak defender that you don't want to expose on your roster, on your team, or on the floor. I think with certain zones, there's also opportunities to get steals, create turnovers. Your opponent might be a poor shooting opponent, so there might be ways that you can expose certain players and make them get involved offensively. And another option might be to protect the paint. One of the things that I think I've shifted a little bit, and it's still shifting in my philosophy, is really what our plan is to use a zone. It's often to change tempo, but for me, it's traditionally been more reactive as opposed to proactive. So what I mean by that is, the opponent's doing something to us and we go to zone to try and guard against that, or to try and switch things up, rather than going to zone in order to, initiate them in a potentially uncomfortable position. And then the other scenario that's a little bit more proactive, which I think we see most commonly with zone pressure, is to use a zone after a free throw make, or a zone press after a free throw make out of a timeout is a common one. I used to be a little bit more opposed to that because I felt that it was predictable, but I believe more now that those strategies can still disrupt the opponent, particularly because a lot of opponents, out of a timeout or after a free throw, might have a script or a specific play they want to go to, and that's not always prepared for against his own. So the next thing with zone, I think, is deciding what type of zone you want to play. With our team at Ryerson right now, our team is fairly athletic. Our player-to-player defense is fairly aggressive. We like to play with some ball pressure. We try to be disruptive, both in the full court and the quarter court. We like to use our length and our speed to disrupt. So for us, our zone strategy, we use a 2-3 zone, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a few minutes. Our zone strategy is a little bit more conservative in the quarter court. We'll play a 2-3 zone, and our goal is to protect the paint and be, again, a little bit more conservative that way. I think there's other strategies to get steals, create turnovers, get the ball out of certain players' hands with different zones. So I think there's lots of options out there, but important that you know what you're trying to do with your zone. And I think a key thing to be aware of with any defense, whether it's player to player or zone, to know what you're giving up. And I think that's an important thing that your players need to know and understand. It's, I think every defense is susceptible to giving something up. So having a clear idea of what that is and making sure the players know that is important in that process. So as I mentioned, we primarily play in the quarter court, a 2-3 zone. This season, we played zone about 11% of the time, which is not that much. But in Canadian university basketball, we don't see teams playing a lot of zone. There's a few teams that might play primarily zone. But ultimately, we don't see a lot. So 11% for us was pretty high. Again, with 2-3 zone for us, it's done because of our intended strategy with it. Based on our personnel, we've got some length, some speed, athleticism, so we can really pack things up. And sometimes we'll base it on our opponent's personnel. So what we're giving up with our 2-3 zone is sometimes some 3-point shooting. And that's primarily what we're trying to force, and we're trying to force some skips. So I'll jump to some clips in a second. But our general principles in our 2-3 zone are this. Our guards, so our 2 players at the top, typically play everything foul line extended or higher, and force the ball to the outside. Our 2 wings on the bottom, their job is to play as high as possible, and I'll show a little bit of this in the clips that I have. And they're forcing the ball to the middle, so we don't want them to get beat baseline when they're guarding the ball. Our center stays in the paint, ideally above the charge circle, protecting the rim, and will shade towards the high post and support some coverage in the high post. The 2 players on the top are primarily in charge of keeping the ball out of the high post. And again, with our 2-3 zone, our strategy is typically conservative and protect, but we do have a bit of a plan as well to throw some disruption out there when teams get comfortable. So specifically for us, when the ball gets to the short corner, and again, I'll show what this would look like on a clip, we want to trap that because we're trying to keep the ball out of that space. So when it gets down there, we'll trap it and try and get it out of there. And we'll always be opportunistic with that, even if we are, if we're not officially in our trapping D. I'm going to try and switch the clips here. Okay, so first thing is just our formation, like I've talked about a little bit. So a big part of our defense is picking the ball up in the full court and having some pressure on the ball. So even if we're in our zone, we're not going to run back to the paint. We want the ball handler to feel a little bit of pressure in the full court. So you'll see one of our top players has picked the ball up in the full court and is there applying some pressure. And the 2 top players, so here and here, will play in a tandem and work together. So if we've got one top player that's pressuring the ball, the other one's job is to protect and make sure the ball stays out of the high post. We really don't want the basketball to go into the high post. We'll see here, we talk about playing with our wings out a lot, which is, it's a bit of an inside joke about it with our team, but we want our players to have their arms out and show their length. So you can see our two wing players in particular, both are showing their length and appear to be covering some more space. And you also just see how high we want our wings to be playing. So on this side of the top of your screen, there is a player in the corner, but we're playing above that player and again, showing our length and playing in gaps. And then the other top player is covering the high post. So as things move here, we're not afraid to bring our wings out from the bottom and come play this. Like this is our bottom player, and they're out above the foul line. And as long as the corner's empty behind them, we will not bump with our top to send the wing back down to the bottom. So when this situation happens, we'll get to an elbow coverage with our one top. So again, the tops are working in a tandem, and the other one will drop back down. So there's basically a line of defenders that the ball handler will see. And again, the wing's job is to force the ball to the middle. So we don't want to allow it to the baseline. So they close out with an angle where any pass to get down below us is really tough. So as I mentioned, if the ball does go down here, this is a scenario that will trap most of the time because we want to get it out of there. Because in this type of rotation, if it gets passed behind us, now our middle is pulled out away from the rim, which is something we're trying to avoid. So we want to go and trap it and just not allow this player on that catch to play one-on-one from that short corner spot. On this one, now the ball is picked, so that player moves out to the short corner, so we end up bumping down, but again, staying high and above this player. Our top now is forcing it the outside, and we're just trying to funnel it into our length and keep the ball from moving to the next side of the floor if we can. And then the last big thing we see here, our center's a little bit low and they will support the high post, but in this scenario, we're going to bring our other guard and they're going to play on top of the high post. We don't want them to get caught underneath, but they're going to make that pass to the high post really challenging. And this, again, we know that we're going to give up some threes against our zone. We might get sucked in a little bit. The ball does go to the high post here, which we're trying to prevent. We are going to cover that with our tops and then sink in with our wings a little bit. And we don't want to fully commit with our center. That's our strategy on this one. Next clip here, one of the common things that we'll face against the way we play our 2-3 zone with this tandem on the top is teams will go 1-4 high or a horn set. So we typically wanted to force the ball to the weak hand of the ball handler when it's in the top and the middle. So most of the time that's to the left. So we'll cover that left side with our other top player. So hopefully if we're doing the right thing, the ball should be going that way and then we're there to pick it up. But if it does go the other way, we'll support with the wing and the center a little bit, but we'll rotate over. So we'll see that happen here. The ball does get passed in. And on this, like we would probably, and hopefully we adjusted as this game went on, but in this scenario, we probably had a little bit too much pressure up here, but not enough real pressure to really challenge the pass back to this player. So we kind of get caught in no person's land. But as you see, the ball goes here, the top that was on this side now comes over to cover the ball, and the other top gets back to cover the elbow or the nail. And we get a little bit sucked out on this clip and lose sight of this cutter behind us. But again, this person's forcing the ball outside. There's no one in this corner, so we could really pinch with this player to cut this off ideally, but our middle's there to step up and we challenge a shot and force a tough shot by a small guard. Here's just a bit of an error that we make, and this is one of the most important parts of how we play. So our wing's high, and this one's actually out of a zone pressure, but we bumped down, and we didn't actually need to bump down here because there's no one behind the wing, but we do have our nail coverage. But when the ball comes back up top, and we would consider this a pretty non-threatening spot on this catch, this player leaves their high post coverage way too early and comes out, and now we leave that high post exposed. So we would have liked to hold in here a little bit more, like to see this player really bust their butt to get back and take this pass away. Because now I think she ends up missing this shot, but the ball's in there. Our center is really stretched, trying to cover a little bit on the high post, but really has to pick up this big. And I think we end up giving up an offensive rebound here, even though the shot gets missed. I probably cut that off. But last thing with our 2-3 zone that I'll talk about is why we don't want to get beat baseline. So again, there's no one in the corner here, so our wing picks up the ball to start, and we're super high, so it almost becomes more like a 3-2 zone in this scenario. Our center stays in the middle, top. Our weak side wing is shifting over, but in this case, the opponent's trying to pin us in, and they do a nice job here. But we've got great awareness to get on top of this. The ball moves. We actually make an error here because 2 players run at the ball, and this should be this player that should go, and our number 24 should stay on the nail and keep that coverage. So we get exposed with the high post right away. We do recover from that, but it goes to the next side, and when we get beat baseline here, this is what we don't want. Now our center has to go help on this, and now we're out of position in about 4 different places in this after we get beat baseline, but both of our tops should be here helping to pick up the cutter. Our other weak side should be at the rim to pick up the cutter, but we're trying to avoid this situation because we don't want to have our best rim protector pulled out and then expose the rim for this cut. So again, that's a big reason why we don't want to get beat baseline, or we don't want the ball to go below us into the short corner. So again, wings sending everything to the middle. I'm going to move on to our pressure now. We'll go back to our presentation. So we also play some 1-2-2 zone pressure, which I'll talk more about in a second. But again, philosophy around why to play zone pressure. As with any changing defense, as I've already talked about, changing tempo or changing momentum. The ability, I think, of zone pressure to use the strengths of individual players. So as opposed to a player-to-player full court pressure, you can put your best, most athletic players at the front of the press. You can put your rim protectors at the back. And there's ability to pick up at different points, which can conserve some energy or keep a team off balance. Again, there's always opportunities to get steals, and with zone pressure, those steals would hopefully lead to easy scores. And the other big strategy of where we use zone pressure is to disrupt the flow into offense. So we had pretty solid size on our team this season, but there was 2 or 3 teams in the league in the country that were bigger than us. So if we just allowed them to bring the ball up the floor and pound it inside, that would wear on us over the course of a game. So the use of the zone pressure to take a few seconds off the shot clock and disrupt the flow into those types of scenarios is a big thing behind our philosophy. So again, for 1-2 pressure for us, steals into easy scores, disrupt the flow like I talked about. And we like the 1-2-2 for a couple different reasons. One, because we would have a couple different looks. Sometimes we could show it and it could just be contain, and then other times we'll trap and play for some steals out of it. So that's with the same look of the pressure, it would create some uncertainty with the opponent. They would become a little bit hesitant because they weren't sure if we were going to trap or not out of certain scenarios. We also like the 1-2-2 because we were able to fall back to either our player-to-player defense or into our 2-3 zone. So again, different predictability for or unpredictability for the opponent in what they're going to face after they beat the pressure. And then with the 1-2-2, we pick up about 3/4 court or just behind that. So, you can still create some steals, put some pressure on, but also not expend the same amount of energy if you have a full court pressure zone or player to player. So going back to some clips again. So here's a look at the formation of our pressure. So our 1-2-2 will typically pick up just behind the 3-point line and try and steer the ball. Again, our philosophy is to try and steer the ball to the weak hand. We're not always successful for that, or it depends where the ball comes in bounds. Our second line of defenders always start behind center for us, and then the third line back inside the 3-point line, but their position depends on who's behind them or how the opponent sets up their press attack. So for us, keys here, we're making sure we always have the middle covered. So our second line weak side defender is always in charge of covering the middle. We want to create a scenario where the ball handler is feeling some pressure, but they might feel comfortable to dribble off across center. And anytime that happens, we will try and go and trap that. So this happens, they're going slow enough, they come across center, so we'll run at it. We don't end up getting a trap here, or the ball's able to get out of it. We make a couple errors, but that's the type of situation that we want to create. They feel there's enough pressure on the ball where we get them going. And as they cross center, we're trying to trap. The other thing with this is we would like to get them going with a little bit more speed. This player is still a little bit too comfortable to be able to make a pass out of this situation, but we are showing our length, so it's not an easy pass and we're able to rotate. The other thing that we do want to create, and we're slightly out of position right here, is we would like this player to be slightly above number 4 on the green team, where this player is looking open and this player might feel encouraged to pass the ball up the sideline, and we've got freedom always to try and jump and shoot that gap. If we don't shoot the gap, or if we're late rotating and gets passed down, we would also look to trap down that way. The big error here, similar to what I talked about in our 2-3 zone, the ball gets passed across the top and out of this trap. We leave the high post way too early. So similar to our 2-3 zone, we leave this player to go guard the ball where it's in a pretty non-threatening position. So we would want to clean that up. I think we end up having to fouling here. Again, just another look at the clip. For the most part, a lot of teams will try and do this. They'll get 2 players behind center and try and stretch this one defender. So if teams get passing this back and forth, we don't want to chase. We're fine with that. They're taking some time off their clock. So we'll read and assess that as the possessions progress. But again, really important that we get middle coverage here. And the one thing that we didn't do a great job of this year is we were a little bit too aggressive with this player. So this one is too high right now, where the player with the ball now is thinking, I can't really dribble across center because I'm going to go into 2 defenders. So we would want this defender to back up a little bit, and again, make the ball feel comfortable to come across center and then come get it. This pass ends up being completed to that middle, but in general, we've got pretty good middle coverage on that scenario. And then the last thing with 1-2-2 of some teaching points for us is this player right here. She's kind of hard to see in the bottom corner, but she's got her chest almost to the sideline. So the way she's showing herself there, she's able to kind of stunt and fake at the person with the ball, but also keep backing up, as opposed to if the chest is facing directly at the ball handler, they kind of realize, and that's a read essentially, like, I'm not going there because that defender's thinking about me. So that we're really big on this body position to encourage potentially this player to keep coming down the sideline. Now it gets moved behind, and you can again see number 4 here shows her chest more straight to the ball and kind of moves towards it, and that stops this player from advancing it across center. If number 4 on this ball movement is a little bit more patient and moves backwards, now this player might start to come, and we could come trap it with these two. But again, in this scenario, we're a little bit more conservative. We've made the offense pass it around a number of times. The shot clock's down to 18, and sometimes our plan was to trap, and then other times it was just to make them move the ball. And now they're still not into their offense. They throw it back to the guard, and they're at 15 seconds on the shot clock. So that's success for us. Last one here, I've just slowed this one down a little bit. But you see the ball gets going with some speed down the sideline. So we come trap it with these two players. This player overruns it, and the player is able to get out of the trap, but we would want to make sure to cut that off coming back out. And then we're taking all the other passes away. We're giving up the long opposite, and we're prepared to shoot the gap on that. This player ends up turning her head and losing sight, so we get a little spun around and don't do a great job out of this, as she should be backing up. But again, that's a scenario where we would look to get a trap. All right, back to the presentation. The last scenario where we use zone is on our baseline out of bounds defense. And we don't do this all the time. We have a strategy that we use for switching it up. And there's always the opportunity for me as the coach to override it. But we do this for a couple reasons. One, because it allows us to protect the rim. It creates an opportunity for a trap or a steal. And it just disrupts the special situation. On end line out of bounds, lots of teams have great actions to try and get a touch at the rim, quick score, open three. So we've used this strategy to disrupt teams that are prepared for those situations. And I think what's happened is over the past 2 seasons, teams are aware that we are using this zone strategy on the baseline. And some teams are becoming more prepared for us to do it. But we are taking some of their game prep time for them to talk about. So we would consider that a win. For us with this, again, we don't do it all the time. I'm going to keep it a secret, but we've got a strategy for when we use it. So we will play player to player, and then we will use zones sometimes. So we will mix it up, which also disrupts the rhythm of the opponent in trying to decipher what we're in. As they're calling that play. For us, the strategy, and I'll talk more about what this looks like when I show the clips, but we're trying to encourage a pass to the corner so that we will go trap that pass. And then what we're really allowing is, again, we're protecting the rim, and we're allowing anything over the top with some freedom to go and try and steal any of those passes over the top. A couple things that I will talk about as we go through the clips as well is there are some threats and some different alignments that are challenging. With this, the line and the stack or stack formation can be a little tricky. Anything that pulls our center away from the rim, so I'll show what that looks like. 4 high or a player in the weak side corner can stretch us a little bit. But generally, we've talked about those scenarios, and our team's pretty good at talking through those coverages when we do it. So I will explain more of it through the clips. Okay, so again, we're not in a traditional zone, or we are in our 2-3 zone, but it's not traditional in that we're just in spots on the floor when the ball is being inbounded on the baseline. We have our strong side, bottom wing is on the ball. And their job is to challenge the pass. And as I was pulling clips for this, I realized how poor we were at some of these details this season. So we'll be working on it in prep for next year. But it's their job to to challenge the pass. They're going to pressure it as much as possible, making sure that basically like 1 foot's out of bounds and they're at an angle, starting at an angle to protect against the rim, and then they're going to work their way in to be a little bit more square, since sequencing on baseline inbound plays are typically a look at the rim, and then they'll start looking further out, once they can't get that quick, easy score. So their job is that, and then if the ball does get passed to that strong side corner, they're following the pass and they're one of the 2 in the trap. And then they just become this bottom person on the zone afterwards. The center, or actually I'll go to the top guard first. The top guard, so on the ball side, their position's usually around strong side elbow. They are always positioned to allow the pass to the corner. So we'll see what this looks like a few times, but it feels like an awkward position because her body position is above number 13, but she knows if number 13 goes to the basket that the center player is going to pick it up. So she's ready to trail any player going to the corner and be on the top side. And then she's the second person in the trap, and then she's going to recover to the top side of the zone out of the trap. The center, their job is protect the rim, match up with the biggest threat in there. They are taking anything strong side out of the trap, and again, recover and become the center of the zone. The top guard on the weak side, their position is usually just inside the paint, foul line, sometimes around the nail, depends on the formation that you're playing against. They're going to be pretty matched up, denying any entry, like coming into this area, but giving up anything over the top, but also has the opportunity to make a play for a steal if the ball is thrown in over the top. And then on any trap in the corner, their job is to rotate for the steal. So again, I'll show some clips of what that looks like after. And then they, again, will take position at the top of the zone if there's not a steal or a quick shot that happens. And then the bottom weak side, they're in the paint. They're matched up, and again, denying any entry, protecting the rim, and picking up cutters. So I'll show a few different scenarios we have of different things that happen and talk through them here. So ball pass comes right to the corner. You can see our top players following it there, inbound defenders following it there, and there we are in the trap right away. There's no player top here right now, but our weak side top of the zone gets sucked way too far in. We don't react well on the weak side here, and this player should be getting around in front to challenge this pass. So the trap happens there. A little bit of bad luck, but a little bit out of position, which leads to the ball coming out and staying with the team. I cut that clip off, but that's a look at what the trap should look like. Here's another scenario. So again, on the ball, this is our top player. She's out of position right now. There's a reason why she is out of position, not saying it's correct, but this team had been putting someone in the weak side corner a lot, and we will pick that player up with the top person most of the time. So she was anticipating that and then gets caught out of position. But again, the center, protecting anything at the rim, weak side, matching and picking up cutters here in the paint. This player, they've got to make sure it's really hard to get it in. And that's one of the things that we really need to do a better job of. Player starts to come out of the corner. We come trap it. This player has a tendency for us to just like get too close to the body of the ball. And we end up getting beat out of these scenarios a little bit too much, rather than containing and trying to deflect the pass out. But there ends up being a handoff scenario here. So ideally we cut this off a little bit more, but you can see the weak side, top players coming out, ready to pick up the next pass, and there we've got a steal. Okay, another alignment here. We've got weak side corner player. So again, this top player for us, based on this alignment, is aware and ready to pick up this player if we need. And then again, the on-ball person's job is to make sure that there's not a free line pass to that player And for us, number 7 could be aware of that too, but she's got to make sure we protect the rim. This player's got to be up, match, and not allow any easy pass in right here. And again, our top, we're giving up anything over the top, anything coming to the ball side corner, we're ready to chase. So you can see 4, and you know, we really encourage some anticipation and reading here. So this player can see the passer and read where they're looking, and you can see everybody's got their eyes there to try and anticipate where the pass might go, because you've got to have some anticipation and reaction through these things as the ball can go to some different places. So again, person comes to the corner, we're ready to trail that as we need. We're protecting things in here. Ball gets thrown over the top, and this time we get a chance to go make a play on it. Next one here, there's some cross screen action happening. So we're doing a bit of a better job on protecting against these passes right into the paint. We're a little bit low here on this weak side, but we did have a third player low, so we're kind of playing between these two. Player comes through, we'd follow it here. Our center's got to stretch and just have some coverage of all this paint area. And again, we got to get some ball pressure so they can't easily pass the basketball in. But this player just reading, and again, reads, the ball goes high, she picks up her coverage, and now we're into our zone. So we've filled this strong side wing with the person that was on the ball, middle, other tops coming back up, and we're in our zone. We get some, again, too close to the ball. We give up a straight line drive here, but we end up forcing a turnover anyway. And here's a look kind of at what the top rotation should look like out of a trap. We actually don't do it properly, but it shows what it should look like. So definitely not active enough on the passer here, but ball comes strong side corner. There we are with the trap. You know, we're not trying to get the steal with these two players. We're trying to get the steal with the next player. So trap happens, we're starting to read, we follow it out, we don't get the trap. So in this scenario, this person's job is to make sure that the next pass is really hard. So they're trying to deflect it or keep it on this side of the floor. And this top player that was in the trap should be recovering to the nail. So just like our tandem principles in our 2-3 zone, we should be getting back to this high post coverage, and then we would be in our zone just like we talked about earlier. This player ends up running at the ball. We give up the next pass. We give up an open shot on this one, so not a great possession, but shows what it should look like out of the trap if we don't get a steal right away, how to get back into the zone for the rest of the possession. I think I've got 2 or 3 more clips here showing a couple scenarios and just ways that teams did find to expose some gaps that you have to be prepared for. So this time we take a bit of a bad angle to follow this player to the corner. And one of the big things is to read how the player catches the ball. So depending on who this player is, you have to have some basketball IQ with this. You need to know if they're a great shooter, because if they are a great shooter, you want to make sure you're close and tight enough that they can't just catch and shoot. But if that's not their strength, you don't have to close out to their body, and you can really challenge the next pass because you know you have a second defender coming with you from the baseline. So you want to just make sure the ball doesn't come out too quickly. Our weak side top here, we might get caught a little low, but this is a good 3-point shooter for our opponent in this scenario, and they're going to the weak side corner. So we want to make sure we're in a position to cover that. So on this one, we go right to the body of this player, and she's a decent shooter, but she doesn't catch to shoot the ball. We've been sucked down from that person going to the corner, and we just give up this next pass too quickly. So that's something that one team did start to do, is they got it in, they just moved it right away in the next pass. So again, just not being too close to the body and being in a position where we can deflect this pass. The trap does not need to happen instantaneously. but we do a nice job of rotating and get a great contest on this. And for this opponent in this game, this was one of their weaker shooters. So again, knowing you're going to give something up sometimes, risk reward, we're pretty happy with this shot overall. Not as happy with that offensive rebound though. 1-4 low or 1-4 high scenarios can be a little bit tricky. So they start someone in the corner. We're probably too close to that player. The center's got a match here. If it's a 1-4 high, we do want to try and match up out of those scenarios and then pick up any cutters that are coming into your area. And again, weak side corner, weak side top is responsible for. So on this scenario, we didn't go all the way to that player, but our number 13 here knows that she's got to get there if the pass goes there. So again, ready to react. On all this movement, now we start to pick up players in our area, ready to follow the player to the corner, ball comes over top, and we're just into our zone. So that's the inbound that we're giving up. We protect the rim, they get in up top, and we're ready to play our zone. And then this line or stack formation is the last scenario that we found to be a little bit threatening. So in this one, we do want to match. The on-ball defender doesn't quite do it here, but should adjust to be a little bit more square so the ball can't go right into this line. And this player is actually out of position. She should be matched. The one key position in any stack scenario is to have this number 24, she's on the outside, still ready to pick up anything that's going to the strong side corner. Again, protecting the rim, picking up players that come into your area. And 24 does a nice job of anticipating, reading the eyes of the passer. We go get a deflection, we get a steal. Let's go back to the presentation here. So I talked about those threats. You know, there's some different looks that we have encountered, you know, that have challenged us in playing this. And again, it's not perfect. There are some risk and reward scenarios associated with this. You might give up some open shots sometimes, but the opportunity to get a steal out of this special situation can disrupt the opponent, and it's a great way to set your defense as well. So that is all I have today. I guess I'll open up to any questions if any came up throughout the process.
Thanks so much, Coach. Yes, we do have quite a few questions, so I'll go ahead and start asking those to you. So a lot of these are very tactical based questions. So we'll start with the first one. What is the difference between your 2-3 zone and a 2-3 matchup zone?
I think I said at the beginning, that's certainly like not my level of expertise with all of the zones, but so I can't like truly articulate a great answer to that. You know, we definitely have what I would say is my interpretation of some matchup elements through our zone, and that, you know, when we're teaching it, we'll say stop, freeze, who are you responsible for right now? Because we do want to recognize where players are, and we want to avoid the offense creating 2-on-1 scenarios for us. So with our zone, there's maybe not a lot of differences from a typical matchup, but again, matchup zones are certainly not my strongest suit.
So what do you typically drop into after you're going to trap? Would that be a 2-3 zone?
It varies. We'll go both with the 2-3 zone, or we'll go into our player to player. You know, if we're in, if we do get a trap scenario, we're usually in a bit of a scramble. So it often ends up in a bit more of a player to player type scenario because you're covering and playing for a steal. But for us, if we get it recontained, it could be either or.
Okay, and this is somewhat related, but what do you sink back into off of a 1-2-2 press? Do you just go into 2-3?
Yeah, same thing. We do a bit of both. Again, try and be a little bit unpredictable with that, so teams can't establish too much rhythm or know exactly what to expect in that scenario.
Okay. And in your zone, would you bump a wing defender if there's no one in the corner, but there's a player in the short corner?
We try not to in the short corner because if we're doing a good job with the angle of the wing person on the ball and the catch is not too low on the wing, which it shouldn't be based on our positioning, then we're okay with our center sneaking towards that a little bit and ready to be there on the catch. And then again, if it does go in there, we are going to trap it. So trying to create a disruption type scenario there, but there certainly are some strategic situations where we might make that adjustment, and we try and have our players work through those scenarios and have some freedom to understand when it might be a good idea to bump and not.
Sure. What would you recommend on a grassroots level for kids that want to get better at defense? Because everybody wants to shoot the ball, everybody wants to score, but defense is obviously an important component of the game. So, what could someone do at home, maybe, especially now, that they could do to improve their speed and their defense abilities?
Good question. I was initially say probably not play much zone because I think learning how to play player to player first is pretty important. I certainly was not the fastest player when I played and spent a lot of time on, hip turns, first step, and then playing some one-on-one was really important because I think even if you're not the fastest player on the floor, if you get a good understanding of angles and ability to anticipate, that you can make up for a lot of athletic limitations. So I think those things, and during this time, I think the more that you can watch defenders and what they do on the ball and off the ball, I think is really important. I think something that gets missed when zone is taught early is some help side positioning and responsibilities. So I think looking at those types of things would be a great place to start.
I wasn't the quickest either, so I did a lot of the same there, Coach. So you've coached in college, and you're of course coaching with the national team. What are some differences that you see in coaching internationally and coaching just in Canada in college? And what are some differences that you see when it comes to defense and how the concept of defense is viewed?
Well, I think in first in Canadian university basketball, we play FIBA rules. So our rule set is the same, unlike American college basketball, but there's definitely some differences. In Canada, we have a reputation internationally and certainly around the country of being a top defensive nation. There's a great deal of pride associated with defense, and we've consistently just been one of the top defensive teams in the world. And I think that is seen throughout our university system, that teams take great pride in playing defense. And as I alluded to earlier, it's primarily player-to-player defense that's played across the country. There are snippets of zone, but there's not a lot of teams that play a lot of zone. And then I guess the difference internationally would be that some teams spend a lot of time in zone. I think it's different by region and country, but Korea is a team that comes to mind that is tremendous at playing zone and mixing things up, and there's some teams that have great strategy like that with 2 or 3 different zones and a zone pressure, again, to try and disrupt the rhythm of the game. Korea is not typically the biggest team on the floor, so they use their zone really well to, again, protect the rim but disrupt and take teams out of their offensive flow.
Great. That's great, Coach. Really enjoyed the presentation. A lot of great questions, everyone. A lot of great questions. Thank you so much, Coach, for joining us. And if you'd like to give some socials or contact information to everyone, I think Coach is going to post those so you can contact her.
Fantastic. I think I just had it up on my screen.
Yes, I'm going to try to put it here in the comments as well and see if that will
my
work.
email is just carley.clarke@ryerson.ca, and get me on Twitter at Carley_Clarke. Happy to answer any other questions that might come up with anybody.
Thank you so much, Coach, and hope you stay well during the pandemic. And everyone, make sure you join us for our next sessions. Thanks and have a great day.
Thank you.